All right, so this will be class one of our Jesus Stories class. So I guess to start out, just to talk about what the class is going to be about, this is supposed to be just some follow-up to the sermon series that Pastor and I did not that long ago on Jesus Stories. I'm going to be bringing some stuff that I have each night, but I've also just left a lot of flexibility in the class to hear your guys' questions, feedback that you have. But the whole goal is to just make it more practical on how to share Jesus with people that it seems challenging to, that you may not feel comfortable sharing with. I personally have had only a minor amount of experience in doing this, and it's mostly been limited to college and just interacting with people at college and sharing Jesus with complete strangers there. Sometimes it would work out really well, sometimes it wouldn't work out, and in those circumstances it could have been something I did wrong, or maybe they just weren't ready to hear about Jesus yet. But to get into things for the evening, I do have, and unfortunately the screen won't pick up on the video, but I do have a, oops, if I use the right mouse. I do have a bit of an article here that I want to share. If you want to read this on your own, I will share it with you all. But just to save everyone's time, I will just summarize it really quickly. This is actually from InterVarsity. That was the college campus group that I was a part of. And it just talks about how this random girl coming in as a freshman got involved with an active church community. She'd been a Christian loosely in her life before, but hadn't really made any meaningful connections with the church, hadn't been to church in several years, as a matter of fact, on her own. And she was just at this meet and greet at InterVarsity. Just, wasn't sure why she was there, just randomly got invited, and it's okay, sure. And she was approached by this girl who was a senior, and she was just all ecstatic because they were wearing the same shoes. They had the exact same pair of shoes on. This girl just came up screaming to her oh, this is so cool, we have the exact same shoes. Freaked the poor freshman out. Oh my word, I just entered a group of crazies. But that actually became really meaningful for her because that in her mind made a personal connection with someone. They were able to have something that they were able to start talking over. And kind of ironically, a few days later, she didn't go back to any InterVarsity stuff for about a week or two. And after that time, she happened to bump into this girl on campus again. And lo and behold, they were wearing the same pair of shoes again. Completely different pair, but they were matching.
So and which one approached?
They bumped into each other this time.
The InterVarsity person?
Yep, the senior who was at that time a leader in the Christian fellowship group, approached the freshman and just said, "Hey, look, we have the same pair of shoes." And then again, happened 3 weeks later, and that just made that connection for her. It gave her something to connect with this person. They ended up going out to coffee a few weeks later, and this girl later became a student leader in the Christian fellowship group for the year to come. She was leading Bible studies and stuff on her own. Really cool story. Again, if you want the full details of it, I can get you the whole story sent to you, but the reason I bring this up is it just shows the power of what we're going to be talking about this evening, which is personal invitations, and just how you can make a connection with people. And just how something very simple, you might not think it's meaningful, it may not even be related to Jesus, but it can actually lead people to Jesus eventually. A similar story for me was, and I even had a little bit of a dispute with my leader of my InterVarsity group over this, was I would spend Friday nights with a group of guys and we would play Dungeons and Dragons. If you're familiar with that, it's a role-playing game where you get to be a knight, a wizard, whatever, in a made-up fantasy land. It's a board game, and you just role play a story. And InterVarsity would have some stuff going on Friday nights occasionally, but I would always go to this. And when my leader approached me about it, she's like, well, why are you doing this extracurricular thing? You need to be here. You're a leader. And I'm like, well, because I am still doing outreach. I'm connecting with these people. And this is really cool. One of the guys that was in my Bible study in that Dungeons and Dragons game group, he actually just got baptized this past Sunday. Yeah, he told me it was going to be happening this past year, and finally happened this past Sunday. Finally worked out where he could get his dad in town for it, and yeah, just again, it's one of those things you don't know what connections you're making in the groups you're already in, but just to kind of that's just kind of my opening bit, I guess, if you will. But to get into the actual lesson plan, so I'm going to try to keep these usually fairly short just because I want us to have time for open discussion once I get through my stuff. So each time it'll just be like a handout with just the questions on the front. I've given kind of like the whole class's takeaway of the day and just wrote that out on the back in a quick paragraph, and there's an extra section for notes back there, and we'll get to the random circle in a minute. I guess to open up with just like our first question there, what's religion? Like when we're talking about like Christianity and stuff, what is our religion? Broad terms, any answers will work.
I think it's an organized philosophy
Sure.
that people use as a guide in their lives.
Sure, it's organized. Philosophy was in there. Excuse my absolutely atrocious handwriting. And then used for guide. So organized, philosophy, and guide. Any other things like coming to mind about religion and what it is?
It should be a biblical study.
Biblical, yes. Yep, for us it definitely needs to be biblical. Any other thoughts? Shared. And that kind of goes with what Roger said about organized. Like those two there, shared and organized, are extremely important.
It doesn't always have to be spiritual. People use all different kinds of things in their life become their religion.
Yeah, it can sometimes be spiritual, sometimes not. And so I think that's good. Like I think that covers a lot of the main bases that I wanted to hit, because the idea of religion is that if you would just look it up in a dictionary standpoint, it's just a set of beliefs that a person holds. It's like, for us, our religion could be boiled down to something we say every Sunday, the Apostles' Creed. Now that's our set of beliefs. That's the summary of Scripture put down for us in a very compact form. And I think one thing that turns a lot of modern ears away from like this idea of religion is that they see it as only just a set of beliefs. They see it as very it needs to be organized, but they see it almost as too organized. They see it as a structure, sets of rules that need to be followed, boxes checked, etc. But I think the key part is that when it is organized, it needs to be shared. And that's even just kind of like that second point there. Religion done right requires relationships for it to actually work, because the modern trend is just to, in our society, just isolate yourself. Well, everyone's going to believe something different anyway, so, well, I might as well just stay at home and keep my beliefs to myself. My personal opinions on life, the world, whether there is a God or not, that's just up to me. I can pick or choose how I see fit, and I don't need to share that with anyone. But that's kind of the barrier that we're going to need to break as Christians if we're wanting to share Christ with the modern world, is to encourage those relationships first. We're not so much in a world where apologetics, if you're familiar with that word, that's kind of like the study of like building up philosophical defenses for the Christian faith. C.S. Lewis was an apologist. He was very intellectual, went through, I love going through and hearing, he did a treatise on, he did a treatise against evolution, but he did it as a funeral oratory. So it's like the funeral eulogy of like, well, it's dead. It never got off the ground anyway, but it's dead now.
Screw chain flowers.
Yes, again, another thing. That one's a lot more literate, but it very much had a lot of intellectual properties behind it of like, how do we process temptation and stuff as a person? But yeah, Screwtape Letters is another great example of that. We're not in an age where people find that relevant anymore. I'm not saying that that stuff isn't useful. I love reading C.S. Lewis. I listen to a lot of his stuff on audio tape still as kind of like my own personal like devotional time. But if you were to bump into your average person in the store, they're not going to be coming up with questions that someone like C.S. Lewis would need to answer. They're just more concerned about making their next paycheck match their bills. You know, providing for their families. If they have families, those families are probably pretty broken. Our society is just kind of crumbling with the family structure at this point. But point being, people just need relationships. And that's why I have that like fill in there, like religion done right requires relationship. Because that's what people in general are looking for. And I think that's something that, as Christians, I think we can be a little bit too eager to maybe jump the bullet. We don't want to maybe start with building a relationship because we want to help fix their problems first. I think I tried pulling up the video, it wouldn't work, but if I can find it again later, I will send it to you all. But it's a video of a person with a nail stuck in their forehead. And it's the idea that, well, the person first needs to, you know, if you were to bump into that person on the street with a nail in the forehead, you'd be like, oh goodness, you need that taken out of your forehead right now. Like, that's kind of a serious thing. But the problem with that is if you rush to, like, assume, like, okay, what's the deal with the nail? Like, that's probably a bad thing. If you rush to assume, you know, how they are feeling about the nail, then you lose connection. Like, if they don't feel any pain over the nail, it might just be fine where it is. And that's kind of how unbelievers are. You know, we see them as like, oh man, you really need Jesus in your life right now. Like, if you just came to church, if you like joined our Christian fellowship here at our church and found Jesus, you spent time in his word, your life would be so much more improved. However, they may not realize that. They may not feel the pain. That nail may have been stuck there for years, and they just grew up with it. Never realized that that is a bad thing, that they don't have Jesus in their life. And so before you want to go up to them and, just try to, rip the nail out of their forehead, they got to trust you first to be able to do the job. Like, they may know they have a problem, but they need to be able to trust you as a friend before you go up and rip the nail out, before you go up and share your Jesus story for our class. And so, how do we build relationships? Just naturally. Like, how do relationships start with people? Friendships and such.
Talk with your neighbors, just
Yeah.
about things in the neighborhood or their kids or something like that.
For sure. Yeah. Talk. Yeah. Yeah. Like shoes. So I know for us guys that may not be the most immediate thing, but hey, it could be a truck or something like that, like, hey, you've got this truck, well, how's it, working out for you? I was looking at that model, but I chose this model instead. It can be anything.
I think you can start out by asking questions.
Yeah.
Questions that you think might be relevant to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really get to know the person. And so really just open those lines of communication and find those ways of connecting people over something in common. It could be, golf, it could be sewing, anything that you can find in common with a person, even if it is just something as silly as those shoes. Like, it does seem silly, right? Shoes, making connection over shoes. But that girl remembered who she was. Didn't remember her name when she bumped into her the second time, but oh, that was the girl who talked about our shoes. And we're wearing the same thing again today. So just find ways of encouraging that conversation with people is really just the best way to start. And then how about, we have a family fun night coming up here at church. Now, how would you, that kind of, I guess, fellowship with that person as a relationship kind of opens the door for a personal invitation for them. Now, what's the difference between just inviting someone and personal invitation?
I think you can invite someone, but then you could also say, hey, can I come by and pick you up? Because that way they've got somebody they know when they get there, and they know how to get there. And I mean, it's, it's a whole different thing, especially if you're going to something new that you've never been to.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of weird for us because we've been in the church for so long, it seems natural, but church can be a very uncomfortable place for some people. I mean, they can view this as like, oh, this is a place where, it's, I don't know, I guess weddings happen there. I know a lot of funerals can happen there too. It feels uncomfortable, especially if they're like, well, I don't know what happens otherwise in the building. I don't know what happens for like their Sunday thing, whatever that is, worship they might call it. That's how disconnected people can be from feeling comfortable at a church. And so that personal invitation is just so incredibly important, of not only just like giving someone that invitation of like, hey, this is happening at our church, hey, you should come. More of like, hey, this is happening at our church, would you want to come with me to this? Pick them up like you mentioned. And also make them feel like, this congregation is already wonderful at doing this, but make them feel welcomed. Like, you might have other friends and stuff here at the congregation that you'd want to see and talk to at the event. You might have responsibilities for actually like running the event itself, but make sure that they have a way that they are still involved with you. Like, they're definitely more than welcome to like go around and linger, but don't let them feel like, I guess, they've been abandoned. Because that's, if you're present with them, like, you don't have to be, I guess, eagle eye over them, but if you're present with them and around for them, it just encourages that comfort for them, and also it keeps it more personal for them. Of like, well, okay, this is an awkward, uncomfortable situation for me, but I know this person over there. Like I can go to them if, this starts to feel awkward for me.
I think you kind of alluded to the fact too that instead of inviting them to church first, maybe invite them to a non-church activity that's at your church, like the Family Fun Night, because that way they get a chance to maybe meet some people, see what it's about, and they're not in a closed setting where everything has to be a certain way.
Yeah, for sure. And because worship can be a very uncomfortable experience. And it doesn't matter if it's like, traditional or contemporary. I know like a lot of people will push for contemporary worship being the more comfort zone for people. And it can be, but it can also be just as awkward too, because they don't understand like, okay, well, why am I doing this? Like, okay, there's some cool music here, or, here we have our great organists and pianists, but it's like, what's the point? Like, people are reading, this guy's getting up, talking about stuff. It can be kind of a disconnect for people, and they don't understand, like, why I need that yet. They don't see that as an actual need. And so, and that's even a problem for just, like, Christians in general today. A problem, especially that COVID just emphasized, was when the shutdown happened for the pandemic, everyone realized that, oh, well, I don't have to, I guess, go to church if I don't need to. I can do a lot of this stuff on my own. Like, I can always just, open my Bible, I guess, if I have the time, do some readings and stuff. If I feel like I need a sermon, I've got my devotionals. But the problem is, again, it gets us back to where we started, is religion done right requires relationships. And that's what the whole point of like doing outreach events like Family Fun Nights are, is to encourage building those relationships so that people can come and feel welcome in a worship setting. Now, I guess one thing I need to make clear is that it's not meant to be, it can kind of seem like we're putting a little bit of the cart before the horse, right? Of like, okay, well, the point is to make sure that they actually find Jesus first, right? He's kind of our number one priority. He's why we're in church tonight, even, is like Jesus has impacted our lives. The whole Jesus story mentality again, but we're more interested in making them feel comfortable. And some people may not just ever feel comfortable in church. And the goal shouldn't be to make them feel only comfortable in church. It shouldn't just be to tickle their ears. I think that's how it was put in the New Testament in some translations, Paul. To just only make them feel nice, make them feel like this is all just happy-go-lucky all the time, because their life problems aren't going to get fixed by Jesus. We kind of even mentioned that in the sermon series. And so this whole idea of like making them feel like personally comfortable and present in a church and in like our church community, our congregation, the whole idea of comfort there might not actually last once they realize that they have to change their life in a way to be fitting with how God sees the church needing to be. People may not want to completely buy into Jesus as their Savior if they have to adjust their life. I guess to take it back to the nail in the forehead analogy, if they realize that they have to remove the nail to like be fitting in, I guess, completely in the church, they may realize that that's not something they want to do. They may not want to change their life habit. That nail's just way too comfortable. It's been there for long. It hasn't hurt them, It hasn't hurt them yet, so might as well just leave it in there.
I think a lot of times the nail analogy is that nail may be perceived by us as a bad thing. I mean, really.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
that until you remove that nail, you're not really fully welcome
Yeah.
in our midst.
Yeah.
And so I think your point about your friend being baptized,
Mm-hmm.
okay, your goal was not to get him to Mount Calvary Lutheran Church.
Right.
Your goal was to have him accept Christ as his Lord and Savior.
Yeah.
You know, I use our neighborhood because it's really an interesting. We have at least one family in who all of them used to go to church, worship, and they don't anymore. And in conversations I've had with them, but one of the boys, he went to St. Teresa, and now he got baptized in the Catholic Church. Now the point is, that's not even close to what his beginning was,
Mm-hmm.
but for him, he's made progress.
Yeah.
But we have other people that it's just you have got to learn. You have to learn a little bit about them before you can really decide what to do. I mean,
For
it
sure.
is frustrating.
Yeah.
But I know some that we know that we hope if it takes 10 years with their children,
Mm-hmm.
and you just keep working with it because you're not out there
Yeah.
to recruit them.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed out.
Yeah, and that's, I think, I know I was kind of rambling there for a minute, but that's, I think the word I was looking for was recruitment. It can kind of come off to some people as like trying to recruit them for the cause or whatever, but, and they may be, that may not make them comfortable and they may leave because of that. But again, that's why I wanted to start with like the idea of relationship. It very much needs to be more like become my friend so I can introduce you to my other friend over here named Jesus. Because that's more or less like how we live out our lives too. You know, we talk to Jesus on a daily basis through prayer. We, you know, communicate with him through the gifts he gives us, through, you know, scripture, sacraments. And so, yeah, I think that was the word I was looking for, Roger, was recruitment. Is we don't want to come off as too heavy-handed on that side. And it may still come off to that way to some people. I guess that's kind of like my last point I was kind of wanting to make. It was like, you know, we've talked about, you know, how to make invitations to a person. We've talked about, you know, what are some things to avoid when being invitational. We've kind of talked about external behavior of like how, you know, we shouldn't, you know, immediately try to, you know, force someone to feel like they need to be a church member right out the gate. But I would also say there's also some just healthy thought process was for you as a Christian trying to evangelize people is never take no personally. I had a really good friend in college. His name was Brian. Really great guy. He was always just kind of on the fringe. He might occasionally come to an InterVarsity thing like every 2 months or something like that. He might pop into my weekly Bible study every 5 weeks or something. Really great guy. We made a really good friend with him all throughout college. We would do board games, card games. We'd go to movies together. Really great friend. However, he just would say no a lot to things. And at first, when I was just starting out, trying to like, you know, get people involved and connected with InterVarsity, just because, you know, that's what I wanted. You know, we all want to see like people come to know Jesus better. But when he kept saying no, I began to take that a little too personally at times. I would just get really nervous, like, oh man, does he not like me as a friend? Am I like trying to force him too much? Am I pressuring him too much? I'm not pressuring him enough. What am I doing wrong here? This has got to be my problem. And sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's never going to be something wrong with you. Sometimes that person may just not be ready yet in their life. even my friend Ryan, who got baptized this past Sunday, um, I talked to him like a number of times throughout college, like, hey, where are you at with, this whole Jesus thing? You say you're an atheist, but you keep coming to my Bible study, like, what's going on here, dude? And, he'd bounce and forth back in time in some of those conversations on where he'd be at, but the point would be, it took time, and sometimes it takes another person to be involved as well. Paul, even in one of his letters said, Apollos watered, Cephas planted, Apollos watered, and God caused there to be growth. Sometimes it takes more than one person, more than just you, to be that impact in someone's life.
I have to remind myself that sometimes when I start thinking like that, I feel like I'm doing the Holy Spirit's job. My job is to tell.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
responsible for all the other stuff.
Yeah. This isn't something. Yeah. This isn't something I like to share a lot, and here I am recording it. But actually, during my sophomore year, I had this horrendous nightmare. It was one of those nightmares that was a little too real to be just a nightmare. But I had this horrendous nightmare, and it was actually had Satan in it. And it was like him, like, waltzing forward, like all these people in front of me, like, all these people I was trying to reach to, be a part of InterVarsity and stuff, and even some that were in my Bible study. And he just kind of laughed and said, you can't save any of them. And Satan is kind of that nasty guy where, he'll tell a half-truth. And the fact of the matter is, yeah, I couldn't. He's right. But in the fact of the matter is, God can. Like, he was trying to get, the whole point in the dream was just like to think to, get me to feel down about myself, like, I'm stressing out. I can't, reach some of these people with Jesus. And, I guess the whole dream was just like supposed to be to laugh at me, like, look at this fool trying. But the fact of the matter is that it's our job to just tell Jesus, like you said, Krista. It's our job to just tell. And when it comes down to it, it's between them and God. It's the working of the Holy Spirit in their lives, and they can either choose to accept that or they can either choose to reject that. It doesn't come down to us, our power, our strength, our ability to be that big defender of the faith like C.S. Lewis was with apologetics and logic and philosophy. That has nothing to do with our ability to just be someone's friend so that we can introduce them to our friend Jesus.
We can add a little something
Yeah.
to what you're saying. In our neighborhood here, we have a family. It's a non-traditional family.
Mm.
I don't need to go into the details,
Sure.
but it's a non-traditional family. And they have 2 boys, okay, and they've been up here to our family fun nights.
I think I remember them. They came to the water one.
Peyton and Dalton.
Yep, I remember them.
And in the interaction with them, with the parent,
Mm-hmm.
they used to go to Sunday school somewhere.
Mm.
So whether it's these 2 people, the parent now who laid a foundation, somewhere along the line, the foundation was laid.
Mm-hmm.
And they came up here, and whether they'll ever go here or anywhere, I don't know. But the connection is made.
Mm-hmm.
We've reinforced the foundation that was laid, and it may never be.
Yeah.
But we can. I can still talk with them. They wave at me, and
Sure.
I do that because I know a little bit about them. I like the kids. It's a personal relationship with them in that way. But you still are a little frustrated. You can't deny that you just love to see 10 of them come up here one Sunday and say, "Hey, we're in."
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen that way. So I like to think you're just there to share.
Yes. Yeah. And no, that's a really great way of thinking about it. And I think even something you said, you may never see the results. Like, you may reach someone and then you might start to make a good connection with them, and then, next summer they move off to somewhere else in the country. You may never talk to them again, you may never see them again. You don't know. And that's where you just have to trust God to be able to be the one doing the ultimate work in their life for them. Trust that whatever you said and did was the best you could do. You'll second guess yourself at times, but that's okay. But know that, the New Testament also tells us that, even when we're not exactly sure what to say, the Holy Spirit will give us the words that we need in those moments. So, yeah, that's more or less what I have for this evening. I do have I have the little circle at the end for us, but first, before we do that, because I can send that home with you, I wanted to ask, what are some questions that all of you have about this topic in general, or about the sermon series? Like I said, I've got stuff planned out for the next few lessons, but I've also left in a lot of time, especially towards the end of the class, to try to address some things that you guys might have. And I might not have the answers tonight, which is why I put those larger open blocks towards the end of the class so I can have time to figure out how to help those. But what are some things you all have?
I think for me is as far as when we talked to, we talked in one of the Bible studies about I can't remember which one it was this week, about being focused on how we conduct ourselves as a congregation and so forth, a little bit. But in the Jesus stories, he is in tune with the needs of the people, the physical, emotional, social needs of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stories are so, the way he deals with women.
Yes. Yeah, especially in that time period.
Their emotional burdens that they carry. And I'm just using that as an example. He understands death. He deals with that, but he also understands poverty. And it seems to me that that's the forefront of his initial contact with people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a Mr. Fix-It so much, but to let them know that he understands.
Yeah.
And they had this thing, what is it? They had it on the Super Bowl ads.
Jesus gets me.
Oh yeah, Jesus gets us.
And
yeah.
when you read the background of that group,
mm-hmm.
they are wanting to share Christ with people who have been rejected by organized religion. And because there is a set of norms that they consider normal. And not to being judgmental, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't do that at all. He goes to the tax collectors, women who are prostitutes, men who cheat. It's all on and on and on. And so I think here at Mount Calvary we do, that's our heart.
Yeah.
And in the ladies group, that's their heart.
Mm-hmm.
So as individuals, it doesn't hurt. You shouldn't feel guilty that you're in the wrong direction when that's what you're going to tackle.
Yeah.
Is people who are really in need.
Yeah. And I think that can be kind of a challenge for a lot of people, because that's kind of like reaching to some of those people can kind of be moving us out of our comfort zone to some extent. And I would say, I guess I would challenge, including myself, all of us to try to do that, but also try to, I guess, push the boundaries of people you would normally talk to. Like, I'm not saying, you have to go down to, the street in downtown and just, try to talk to anyone who walks past you. But at the same time, be ready for whoever God puts in your life. You might get caught by someone that you weren't planning on having a conversation with. You know very little about them, but you may end up making a connection with them. I know one night, Roger, you actually mentioned that you met someone at, what was it, the Sam's Club, that you made a random connection with, and you took the time to actually talk with them. And I don't know where that's gone, but
Yeah, I haven't seen him again.
yeah, and kind of like we mentioned, you may never know how things turn out, but just always be ready for like whoever God puts in your life at that moment, just to, you know, live and act like a Christian and be that ambassador. But yeah,
I had a situation a couple of years ago now, I guess. I had a new neighbor moved in.
yeah,
A woman and her son. They moved up here from Kentucky, I guess it was. So they were in the backyard soon after they moved in, and I was out there talking to them about neighborhoods and different things. And I brought up, I said to her, I said, do you folks have a church home?
mm.
And she looked at me kind of funny. She said, what do you mean a church home?
Yeah,
I said, well, I just wondered if you went to church. I said, I belong to Mount Calvary Church down the road here. I said, I'd like to invite you to come down. Well, they're kind of not very outgoing people. I don't
Sure.
hardly ever see them or talk to them, so it had to come up again. But
yeah,
that's at least
yeah.
kind of planted the seed, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's always kind of awkward just trying to open up like, well, what's your, you know, religious standing, you know? It's always kind of hard to broach that. And sometimes people will just randomly broach the subject for you. And sometimes it's kind of up to you to open up that topic. And it can be kind of hard sometimes. I think, though, that kind of how we talked about the difference between invitation and personal invitation, I think that can make a big difference because, like, maybe if you approach them again, you know, about like, hey, we've got this family fun night, like even just the trivia night coming up next week, this next Friday, like, give them. People are usually a little bit more willing to commit when you give them something specific to commit to. Just generic every week Sunday worship's kind of a little awkward for some people, especially if they haven't grown up in a church where they think of church as a home. I don't know those people. I don't know their life situation, but I know a lot of people view the church in a very negative light of, oh, well, that's, you know, the place my parents took me to that ostracized me as a kid because I wasn't acting how they thought I should. You never know, but
I think sometimes though too, Merle he's extended the invitation.
Oh, yeah,
He's
yeah.
a neighbor, so they're
Mhm.
gonna watch
Yep.
him and see
Yeah.
what he does and how he responds to things. And I think
Yeah.
your life is probably a witness to them.
Oh,
and
for
you
sure.
probably don't have a lot of wild parties. Or they're all Mount Calvary people probably now. But, you know, they're gonna watch and see, you know, he's extended the invitation. Now
Yeah.
they're gonna watch and see what happens and what he does.
They can see me pull out every Sunday morning.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that,
Don't wonder where you're going.
yeah, and eventually that's, you know, it may not mean something to them now, but after they see that over the years, it's like, oh, he's committed to this. Wonder what they have going on.
I think they work out of their home, but I'm not sure what, I think she said they work for Sprint or somebody.
Gotcha.
I don't know what they do. But they're hardly ever out.
But
Once in a while, in
Yeah.
the evening, you might see them doing their yard work.
yeah, and again, I just cycle back to something I said earlier. Like, you did really great by like trying to open that invitation, and sometimes people are just they're gonna say no. That doesn't mean that you can't, you know, stop being in their life and just be that presence. Like sometimes just people seeing you do your life daily as a Christian, that in itself is evangelism. Like, it's, you know, we always think, you know, you have to be up on your, you know, your soapbox on the street corner, you know, just reading from the gospel every day to be doing true evangelism. But it can be just the simple stuff of, you know, you just being around and being a neighbor for them. They may not see that they need you as their neighbor yet, but who knows? They may hit a hard spot in their life and they're like, you know, that Merle guy next door, he's a really nice guy. Maybe he could help with this. Maybe he could give some advice. So, you never know. So, yeah.
I think it's hard too when people say, well, you're a Christian, you're too judgmental.
Yeah. That's a stereotype that the church is going to be fighting for a number of years to come. But,
And some Christians are.
yeah.
Well, some aren't, you're right.
Yeah, and I think in that case, it kind of depends on the situation, how you want to approach it, but I guess if I know the person pretty well, I usually respond of, yeah, you're right. Being a Christian doesn't make us perfect. We can sometimes come off a little too harsh. We can sometimes say some things that are a little nasty. It's kind of part of our set of beliefs. We believe that all people are sinners, and that includes us. Like, we don't say everything right. We don't do everything perfectly right. We can't even pretend to be. So, I think that's kind of where just that being the friend comes in, because then they can just experience you of like, oh, well, you're not judgmental. My friend Brian that I mentioned earlier, that was kind of the sometimes comer to InterVarsity stuff. He had stuff in his life that he had been judged for by Christians previously. And, when he broached the subject with me about it, it was very surprising to him that I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That's not exactly what I believe is right for a lifestyle choice, but that's your choice. I was honest with him about my beliefs, but I didn't come off as, oh, I don't want to be your friend anymore, which was kind of what he was expecting. He was expecting me like, maybe you don't want to be my friend because this is how I live my life. And it's like, you can still be my friend. And just kind of being there for those people in those situations and being different than some of those like extra judgmental Christians, just not being that way. It makes a difference. Again, you never may see the ending outcome of it, but yeah.
And I really believe, you mentioned the words judgmental and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
that in some cases the people you're sharing Christ with, it would be a detriment for them to invite them to a particular a place at
Sure.
the time initially.
Yeah.
Because you know that based on the norms that they expected of the people,
Mm-hmm.
that they would not be, quote, welcome.
Yeah.
But I think that's what
Yeah.
we've been working on here in Mount Calvary, is to be welcoming to everybody.
Yeah.
And I'll close with the first family fun night,
Hmm.
when you looked at the variety of people that came, different religions, different every
Yeah.
variety you could almost think. They came from here and there, just for this. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
They felt welcome there.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's kind of monotone for the tonight. It's pretty simple and straightforward of like, you need to be a friend, you need to make those connections with people before you can share Jesus. But I just wanted to open up with this one just for the mere fact that I think it can be something that's just overlooked in evangelism. We often don't think that our daily lives are evangelism. We often don't immediately see just trying to make a friendship or just start out a casual acquaintanceship with someone as evangelism. But that's what God can use to turn something like that into ministry for his purposes. So with our little bit of time that we have left, I'll explain the little circle on the back sheet. You might want to angle the page so the oval is kind of going like this direction, a little bit more flat-wise. It might be easier for you to do it. But one thing that I found helpful for me just to get me like focused on like doing outreach and stuff at Creighton on just the college campus was to build like a relationship tree of like people that I know. Some of those people, so you know, you would start with yourself in the center. Like you'd write your own name in the center, and then you would just branch off. So I guess one branch, like I could write out the individual names, but one branch for me would be Mount Calvary. That'd be a branch for me. You all are part of like my relationship tree branch. Another branch could be like my list of friends from college that I still keep up with. Another branch could be my seminary friends. Another branch here indicator for me would be the LSA. So it can be, you can start out with like broader like groups and then just break it off into like individual people and just start naming people with it. But the idea is just find people that you have relationships with and just kind of list them out or branch them out as you see fit. And then find two people in that tree, two names in that tree that you can pray for on a regular basis that may not know Jesus or may not have a strong relationship with them. May not know him at all. They may be part-timers, you know, or I like to call them Christmas Christians of, well, you know, I'll go for the holidays, but they're not really invested in the relationship with a church community or with Jesus. And it's kind of called, InterVarsity called it the 2+ idea. And the idea was just just start with at least two people. Just pray for them every day. You may already be doing this on your own, but the idea is to just build on those and just find those two people that you can really invest in. And I would say kind of where I want this class to kind of move even on towards would be, those could even be people that are in our congregational setting that may not be connected with us as well. They could be some of our new members that we've had come in. Find ways of maybe connecting with them better because, okay, yeah, they're in the front door, which is great, it's a blessing, but at the same time, do they feel like they've had that personal invitation, that personal welcome where they can feel supported as a church body yet? So that's kind of like, I guess, my assignment for week 1 would be just find the people in your life that you could pray for, pick out 2, and find time to try to maybe invest in them, and just start by being a friend, and maybe that'll open up for an opportunity where you could share a Jesus story. You never know. So, any other thoughts, questions? All right. Well, thank you all for coming for the first night. Like I said, tonight was kind of very basic of, you know, be a good person, be a good friend to people, but hopefully tonight was useful nonetheless. And next time we're going to be talking about a little bit more like where people are at and kind of a tool that, again, a lot of the stuff is going to be coming from InterVarsity, but a tool that they kind of use to, like, I guess, as best as you can judge where someone's at in their spiritual walk. You can never know exactly. As a matter of fact, I've still got the whole 2+ thing. I actually have a card in my wallet that was my friendships in college where I had everyone mapped out. And it also had a spot where I could put them on like the chart of like, okay, where are they at? And I think for like 3 of them, I had them in the middle between 2 because I couldn't quite tell. So it's a tool just to kind of get you thinking about where they're at and maybe what some next steps could be in like how you share Jesus with them. So